Hey guys, and welcome to another tutorial for freshly squeezed samples. This is your host John Grand, and today we're going to show you how to create complex drum patterns in Ableton Live. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load in a drum rack. I love using the drum rack because it allows me to load in a lot of samples at once. So I'm just going to do exactly that. So let's go ahead and select a bunch of these kick samples. Before I get started, let me make sure that I have a nice limiter on here so it doesn't end up blasting your ears. For any of you that are wondering why we do this, it's so that whenever we export this video, it doesn't end up overbearingly, well, the volume doesn't get too loud in your speakers. So let's go ahead and load up 30 of these kicks, and then let's go ahead and set up a basic kick pattern. I'm going to start off with the first one and see how that sounds. One of the reasons I love using drum rack is because I'm able to do this. I'm able to kind of go and audition a bunch of kicks at once, which is really useful. The next part is we're going to load in some snares, so let's repeat this process. And we're going to go ahead and go back into our good friend Dave Parkinson sample pack and load in a bunch of snares. Let's go ahead and draw in some snare patterns. And duplicate those. Now, for any of you that are wondering, how did he just get to copy all of those so quickly? I use this really cool program called Live Enhancement Suite, which I highly recommend you download, which is going to help your Ableton Live experience quite a bit. So let's go ahead and play those back to back. I'm pretty happy with that snare, but I guess we can try out a couple more. Really dig that snare actually, so I'm going to stick with that one. Let's go ahead and bring in some hi-hats. And again, what we're just doing at this stage is literally just kind of setting the foundation for what can become complex drums later. And I'm just going to draw in some simple hi-hat notes. And let's go ahead and bring in the drum rack. And let's go ahead and select a bunch of these hi-hats. And let's see what that sounds like. Let's go ahead and add some more hi-hats. This is one step in kind of making your drums sound a little bit more interesting. One of the good things about using drum rack in this scenario is that we're able to work with a lot of different hi-hat patterns, which is going to give us a lot of flexibility. So let's go ahead and draw in some 16th hi-hats. One thing I like to do with my hi-hats is, as you notice here, I'm playing with the velocity, right? So on this first hi-hat, I want it to kind of hit hard. On the second one, a little bit softer. And the way I'm doing this is I'm holding down Alt on Windows, on a Windows PC. On Mac, I believe it's Alt as well. If it's not, then try either Command or Control. And let's go ahead and duplicate that. So there you have it. That's a really simple drum pattern. Let's go ahead and bring in some percussions. And I'm just going to label this percussion. If you're wondering why I like to color things yellow, I don't know. I think it's just sort of like a psychological thing for me. Drums are just kind of yellow. It might have been the fact that I grew up playing yellow drums or something. I don't know. But I just really like yellow for drums for some reason. Everyone's got their preferences. So let's go ahead and load in some percussions. I'm going to bring these down quite a bit. And let's go ahead and draw in some simple percussion. Duplicate that pattern. I'm actually gonna copy this first one because I think that was the right one. So far all we've done is really just kind of play around with a bunch of different MIDI notes, different percussion. We can add in some extra percussion. As you can see here, there isn't really like a whole lot of thought behind it. I'm just kind of adding in a bunch of different elements just to kind of give myself a groove, a feel. One thing I do want to point out as well is that if you do want to give your drums a little bit extra life, one thing you can do is play with Ableton's groove. And in this case, let's say we wanted something a little bit more shaky, a little bit more swingy. We can play around with some of these groove patterns, and let's just see what it sounds like when I add these to the percussion or the hi-hats. So let's go ahead and try this one. So it just adds like a little bit of swing, nothing too crazy. This is a custom swing that I've made. Let's see what that sounds like. The higher we turn up the quantize, the more kind of the effect kind of comes in. We turn the timing down, kind of takes away the groove. Let's go ahead and bring that same groove this time to the percussion. All we gotta do is just click on the last groove that we loaded. And as you can hear there, the drums have already completely shifted from where they were. If you noticed before, they were really stiff, which isn't bad, but if you did want something a bit more swinging, it would sound like this. Maybe you don't want that much swing though, so just make sure you bring the timing down to about 50. You can also play with the global amount here. The higher you bring up the global amount, the more it's affected. One cool thing that you can do too, that you can always kind of play with your friends with, kind of show them, you know, a couple of cool tricks. Automate the swing. This is a really useful technique if you have a track that is going to be really swinging and you want your intro to kind of match what other DJs are doing, which a lot of DJs don't really mix songs with a lot of swing these days. But let's say you wanted your track to have a lot of swing, but you also wanted your intro to kind of not have too much swing so that when DJs are mixing it, it doesn't interfere with their mixing, right? So what you can do is, you know, if you were to have your first 17 bars come in kind of straight, you could little by little start bringing in that swing. It would sound something like this. So this is where the DJ is mixing in his track. Then little by little, your track starts becoming more swingy. And what's interesting is that the human ear won't even perceive that right away. Only until it's actually fully realized and the track is kind of taking form will somebody really notice that there's like, oh wow, this track went from like a very stiff pattern into something a bit more swinging. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and bring in some extra elements to make our drums sound really unique and cool. One thing I like to do is I love adding Foley sounds to drums because this kind of gives our drums a little bit of extra life and an organic kind of feel. So let's go ahead and find some Foley loops. I do apologize, a lot of that's very loud. So something like this might work. Let's go ahead and loop this guy a few times. Maybe on this one we can reverse it. Let's kind of bring these guys and duplicate that. And I'm also going to sidechain the kick to this loop that I've created. So what we're going to do is bring a compressor in here. We're going to select the sidechain from the kick. I turned off the EQ because we're going to try to sidechain the whole thing. And one thing I'm going to do actually is I'm going to consolidate these clips. And what we're going to do here is we're going to play around with the transients. We're going to change this transient pattern to 16. And that's going to give us a bit more of a tight feel. As you can hear there, that's just giving us like a really interesting melodic pattern that you probably wouldn't find in a sample pack, but that you can kind of create and make your own. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to find another sample, and this time let's go back to our friend Dave's pack, and let's just look at some of the drum loops that he has and see if we can bring any of those into our drum loop. So maybe something like this could be nice. So I'm just going to go ahead and loop this, and then I'm going to mix this into our current drums. We're going to play around with the transients again. I'm going to set this to 16ths one more time. Now remember, since the drums are swinging on this side because of the automation that we had, we should probably also get these drums swinging at this point. So what we can do is consolidate this clip by itself. We're going to load in that same groove that we had before. And now we have those drums that are also swinging on that side. Now one thing I wish that Ableton would let you do is actually automate the amount of the transient preserve that you can do here. Unfortunately, it's not possible, and maybe they'll do this in the future, but for now, you're just kind of stuck with having whatever pattern you select being the default. So the next thing we're going to do is play around with some send effects. I'm going to bring in the Ableton delay or the Ableton echo. Either one will work fine, doesn't really matter. We're going to set this all the way to wet because since this is a send, we don't want this going to 50% or anything under that. Otherwise your drum loop is going to sound a little bit phasey. So let's go ahead and bring in these guys right here. We're going to create a group. This is going to be called our tops. With the tops, we can kind of play around a little bit with setting the echo to kind of give us a little bit more groove. We're going to play with the filter a little bit to remove some of the lows. Turn the feedback down quite a bit. We can unlink these two and maybe give one a different pattern. So let's give this one, instead of a dotted eighth, a regular eighth. If you play and switch from stereo to ping pong, you'll get a slightly different effect. We can also play with the modulation. We can also play with the gate and ducking, which is going to sort of reduce a little bit of the delay whenever a transient kicks in. And then we're just going to adjust this to taste And we're also going to be sidechaining this so that the kick really is coming through and we don't have these other tops that are kind of taking over, right? So let's go ahead and set up the sidechain. We're going to bring in our kick, bring this down quite a bit. And then now what we're going to do is we're actually going to print this delay, and we're going ahead and we are going to send this to audio 8. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to record this pattern that we just created, or I should say the echo. So let's go ahead and record that. And we can just duplicate that. We can actually get rid of this now since we've already recorded it. So this is going to be our send effects. So now we have it here. Now we have a lot more control, consolidating this, and now we can play around with the transients a little bit more and kind of mix this into the rest of the drums. But let's first audition it with the kick so we kind of get a good idea of what it sounds like. Now we're going to quantize it by holding down Command Shift U or Control Shift U. And now we're kind of getting this groove nice and tight. We can also play with the pitch. If you want something nice and hi-fi. If you want to add a little bit more extra grit to it, we can bring in an OTT over the top compressor. And since that first note, or that first set of transients is missing, I'm just going to copy this to every single beginning. I'm going to cut out some of the lows. I'm also going to make it a little bit more mono since it's a bit too stereo for my taste. And if we do want to bring it a little bit wider, we can pull in a Hass effect or a Haas effect. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that these percussions feel a little bit too loose, so I want to tighten these up a little bit. I'm probably just going to do that with an OTT because it's usually the easiest way. Get those drums nice and tight. Now I'm going to freeze that, flatten it, and then we can tighten it even further. Let me consolidate these two together. With these guys, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to freeze it again, tighten them up even a little bit more. Now with these drums, it sounds like there's a little bit too much transient coming through, so I'm going to try to tame that a little bit. And I think that just about does it. We can get rid of those clicks as well. Flatten it. And then I'm also going to sidechain this one to the kick because I think there's a little bit too much of that transient coming through. And I am just going to bring in my compressor, which I thought was over here, but I guess I must have deleted it already. So let's go ahead and bring in a compressor. sidechain that. And if you really want that kick to come through even more, we can just copy this compressor, put it on the tops, and adjust to taste. And there you have it, folks. That's how to create complex drum patterns in Ableton Live. This is one of many different ways that you can do this, but I will make some other videos that will show you some other methods. I hope you enjoyed this. If you like this video, don't forget to leave a comment, like, and subscribe. Thank you guys. Take care.